Well, hello, my friends. It's Shawn Petite, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Look at this vintage goodness we're going to be creating today. These are the products that we'll be using. And I'm starting today on an 8x10 MDF board. I'm using some black gesso, no papers to start, but they're coming. So I'm starting with some Deco Art Media black gesso. And I'm just going to cover the entire piece. One, to seal it, and then two, to give my vintage papers a wonderful frame because I wanted all of those torn edges to really stand out. And look at how nicely that works. So I'm putting all of my vintage papers down with my Deco Art matte medium, and I will have these papers are from a couple of different collage packs, and I will have them listed on the blog in case you want to get your hands on those. But I'm putting this first paper down as kind of my background, and I've grabbed some cobalt teal fluid acrylics, and I'm using a very wet, watery brush, and I really want just a little hint of color to peek through. There's not a lot of color in this piece, and so when you put it down on that black, it looks kind of rusty almost, and I love that effect. Plus it adds just a tiny bit of color on that paper. Now this is actually gold. I'm using a combination of transparent yellow oxide and metallic gold. And oh my gosh, that tiny bit of gold peeking through is just fantastic. The shimmer, just little bits here and there peeking out from underneath those papers. I made sure to get it out to the edge so that it would show up. And it's just lovely. And then I use the yellow to kind of add to that vintage kind of antique feel. So now I've gathered my papers that are really the backdrop to the focal point, but they really show up. And so I wanted them to be subtle and kind of tell the story of growth and our stories, and also be pleasing and wonderful and all of that. So I'll have all of these papers listed, but I'm again putting them all down with my Deco Art matte medium. I'm putting the focal point area towards the side, and that's for composition and to make the piece interesting. Then I'm adding additional focal points, and I'm using vertical and horizontal positioning with the papers to again add interest to the piece. There's not a lot to this, so when I add things to it, it has to be very deliberate. There's not a lot of color or pattern. I've printed my flower on tissue paper, and this flower is available for free to you in the resource library. And you can, if you're not a subscriber, you can sign up, and I'll have links for that. If you are a subscriber, you know how to get in and get that and all of the other free resources in the library. I've got some vintage tickets, and again, vertical and horizontal placement on these to keep the eye moving around the piece and to keep it visually pleasing and interesting. So now I'm mixing my favorite products for when I'm doing texture stenciling, modeling paste and gesso. And gesso makes the modeling paste really white, and it helps that modeling paste smooth out just a tiny bit so that it dries faster, and I'm all about creating quick. This is the Vintage Duo stencil, and I love this. The detail on this flower is just wonderful. And I'm creating, again, going to opposite sides of the page to create interest and to draw the eye around the piece. And I wanted to extend that out because it looked very linear and not very well blended into the piece. So I wanted to bring that modeling paste out into the piece, but I didn't want to bring all of that stencil. So I grabbed a little flowers stencil and just grabbed one or two flowers here or there, and it brings it in and connects it to the rest of the papers and the piece and creates a wonderful vignette that feels like everything is working together. So now I'm just going to grab some crackle paint. I just want a couple of swipes on there for that interest, and again to keep things moving around the piece. And I love DecoArt's crackle paint. It just crackles every single time. It's just wonderful. Not a lot, just a few swipes, and it's perfect because it will allow the watered down paint that I put on top to just really get in those cracks and accentuate it. So I'm using raw fluid acrylic in raw umber and a water. This is a wash. It's not a glaze, it's a wash. And I do a wash when I want it to feel rustic and like tea stained and coffee stained. And so I'm just watering my paint down and applying it over the modeling paste area so that it sinks in around all of that texture and really shows off the modeling paste, the stencil design actually gets in all of those cracks. And I'll wipe it back enough so that the white of the modeling paste does show up. So now I wanted to, I knew I was going to be putting words down that were going to have black, so I wanted to introduce kind of that dark color throughout the piece. Even though there's black around the edges, I wanted, again, when you add those elements to the piece, it unifies everything, it brings everything together and makes it feel cohesive. Also, it, again, interest around the piece helps the viewer move around and have it be interesting. This is the vintage posted stencil, and I'm actually using, I started with black and it felt too stark, and so I'm mixing the black and the potting soil together in my stenciling. I felt like it needed just a tiny bit of color. It was very, very neutral, and I wanted to bring back some of that teal that was subtly in the background. And so I did that, and again, working vertical, keeping those lines vertical and horizontal in the composition. I grabbed some words from the free word sheet that's in the resource library, Your Story Matters, and I'll put those down with some DecoArt matte medium, and then I'll do some shading around the flower and the words, and that is really it. Super easy. It felt good to do a piece that was really focused on collage and all my vintage papers. It's just one of my favorite things to do. I did add a little bit of color to the paper so that it didn't feel so stark white, and it's perfect. Wiped it back a little bit. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you enjoyed this project, I hope you subscribe, hit the alarm bell so that you get notice every time I do a video every week. Stick around for the conversation at the end. Oh man, it's a good one about your story and how important you are, and how we need you. I need you. I will see you next week. Well, hello loves, happy Sunday to you. Look at this, I just love it. I haven't done like a real heavy on collage focused kind of piece in a while, and it just felt good to kind of come home. You know, you kind of ebb and flow in your art practice and that kind of thing. It just felt good. Felt so good. So, just a couple of things. This flower will be available for you in the resource library, and the words I used again are part of that sheet that is available in the resource library of encouraging words sheet, positive words I should say. I went over everything throughout the video, and the stencils that I used today will be on sale as always. All right, so this piece was inspired. So I got an email, as usual. I got an email from a gal who no, it wasn't an email. It was actually a comment on a blog post, and I see the comments come in, and then I have to go back to my behind the scenes website to comment and that kind of stuff. But I'm like, what is this? I don't remember this blog post. And I'm thinking of stuff that's recent. And I'm like, I don't remember this blog post. So I went into the website and I took a look, and the blog post was from almost 7 years ago, you guys. It was like one of my very first, I don't even remember. Yeah, there wasn't even a video. It was just a piece that I did, and I wrote a lot on this blog post. And this gal shared how that blog post met her today, 7 years later, today, in her place of need. And I was like so incredibly blessed. And that's how this came about. So I want to share, I printed it out because it's kind of funny, because I was reading it. I'm like, dang, that's good. I'm like, I wrote this. I'm like, did I quote somebody? But I didn't. And so I'm going to have it for you in the blog post. I won't read the whole thing for you right now, but it was titled When Doubt Rises. And the gist of what I wrote was how when we're doubting, we need to be good to each other. And how, it was so rich. And I was sharing what was on my heart at the time. I was at the beginning of this journey that I've been on now for quite some time. And I was finally at the end of some of my healing, my own personal healing process of coming out of the darkness. I call it the dark days. This was so heartfelt. I've reread it several times, and I'm like, man, this is good stuff. And and I wrote out like 6 steps of how you can handle things when doubt rises, and etc., etc. So the point of that is that, and you can read all of it. I'll have it posted on the blog post. But your story matters. My story back then, I did not know that 7 years later, or 6 years or 7 years, somewhere in there, because it was from 2012, sorry, how this would affect someone, and how my story continues to affect people. And so it is so important for us to, one, be comfortable with who we are, and that takes work. It takes work. It took work for me to get to this place to be able to share my story. When it was raw and real, and I was in it, and I was hurting, and I was a mess just a mess all over the place, a mess. I wasn't sharing my story, but I began to seek others who had been through the same thing, whether that was personal or online or wherever. I had to find a way out. And that's what your story, your specific story, it doesn't have to be a tragedy, it doesn't have to be anything epic, it's your story. And as soon as you share your story, when you're ready, when you're in a place, as soon as you share your story, you instantly create a bond with someone. And when I shared my story to people who were close to me, who are my inner circle, immediately it changed our relationship. And these were safe people that I trusted beyond all doubt, who wouldn't judge me. So sharing our story can be, when we first start to share it, we have to really be careful and gentle with ourselves and that time, because we don't want to share our story and then be hurt again in the process. But I was at the point in my sharing that I was okay with what had happened and where I was, and that I knew that I had something that I could possibly offer someone else that would help them on their journey. And that's what I did. And it takes courage. It's bravery, because as many wonderful comments as I get about what I share, I get negative comments too. And so that's why I say your story matters. It matters in every stage that you're at. Whether you're at the beginning and your story is a mess and it's messy, it matters. It matters. It matters. And if you can share that with someone that will love you through it, it will help you heal. It will help you grow. It will help you transform. And if you share your story when you're through that, you have the confidence to know what you're talking about when you're talking to someone, to be able to help them on their own journey. And one of the things that I love about this, what I wrote, I'm just still so like, wow, that was awesome, is that we are perfectly imperfect, and that is a beautiful, beautiful thing. We as women uniquely understand the inner battle that goes on each day inside of us. Let's encourage each other, love each other, and be a safe place for each other. And that's what we need as we're sharing our story, and that's what we need to be for others. A safe place where people can share their story, whatever it is. Whether we agree or disagree or understand or any of it. That safe place seems to be missing nowadays, it seems. And so your story matters wherever you are on your story journey. And we need to stick together. We need to be good to each other. We need to honor each other's story, wherever that is. However wonderful or messy it is, we need to honor it. And then when we have worked our way through our stories, we need to share it so that other people can be helped and healed. And it's really good for our own souls to share our story. The connections that I've made from sharing my stuff, all of that is unbelievable. And friends that I will have for life, and people that I'm getting to know now because of the stories that I share. So, my loves, you are important. Your story matters. You are working through your story or on the other side of whatever. Share it. Find women who will love you and be a safe place for you, and then you turn around and do it back. Love them and be a safe place for them. All right, loves. I hope your Sunday is wonderful, and I hope that it's peaceful and restful, and I hope that you know how important you are. All right, have a wonderful Sunday, and always know that you are loved.